So, are you with us or are you against us?
I was puzzling you with the nature of my
Because power is a hungry thing. And there's always a rat bastard looking to take what's mine.
What is this, in Taliban?
Oh, no. When combat gets going, I mean, like, really going, you're gonna wish you was.
Mobland, new series streaming March 30th on Paramount Plus.
Hey, Jennifer Walden here for Mix Presents Emmy Award Season Virtual Event 2025. Joining me is supervising sound editor Matt Skelding on Paramount Plus series Mobland. Hey Matt, thank you so much for being here to talk about Mobland.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thank you.
So this isn't the first time you've worked with director Guy Ritchie before, and the episode that you've submitted for award consideration, episode 101, Stick and Twist, was directed by Guy Ritchie. So knowing his tastes and what he kind of likes in terms of sound, what were his expectations going into episode 1 of Mobland?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was involved in King Arthur, but very much on the periphery of that show. But at least I had spent some time in a room with him and seen how he worked. And he's got his core group of collaborators, his editor who he works alongside with, who very much leads the sound editorial process. It was interesting on this show, he was working with a completely different editor. So it was a very different sort of process. And Alex Berner, who was the editor of the first block, very much led. And we worked alongside him. We actually put a team quite early in the cutting room right next to Alex, in the room next door to Alex, to try out ideas and try out some certain sound designs and try to find the sound of the show. And I think it's maybe not a completely traditional sounding Guy Ritchie show, I would say. It's a bit more pared back at times, a bit more naturalistic than certain other Guy Ritchie shows. I think this show lended itself to just being a bit more naturalistic than some of his other recent projects. Martin, our mixer, had also mixed The Gentleman last year. So he'd obviously spent time with Guy and kind of knew his style and knew how he worked. So it was quite a smooth process, really.
And this is definitely a little different, sound-wise from some of the other things that Guy Ritchie has done. But the dialogue always is paramount. And the accents, the slang, as an American, I'm leaning in, trying not to miss anything because there's so many narrative strings that get tangled up in this first episode. So can you talk about, protecting these incredible performances and also how you improved clarity on the dialogue?
Yeah, I would say it was a real concern. And I'm a dialogue editor by trade. Before I was a supervisor, that's what I did. And it's like my main focus. And the sound design's lovely and exciting, but making sure the words are clear is obviously the main thing that I enjoy doing. So we obviously had a range of people listen to the show and try and make sure people understood it as best they can. We did a lot of ADR. There are certain characters that are full ADR, but our core principles, they were doing such amazing performances on set. We didn't want to do ADR to replace that stuff, and no one did because the performances were so great and we needed to preserve that. So there's lots of dialogue editing techniques and there's stealing syllables and there's all the amazing mixing work that Martin does just to try and protect the dialogues as best he can, even though we like to try and create some rich environments and backgrounds. Hopefully there's none of those environmental things are impacting on the words happening at the same time as the really important lines of dialogue. Again, we had a team working on certain scenes very early on in the edit process to see what could be salvaged and what couldn't be salvaged. The Tom Hardy's Harry's flat is right in the centre of London. It's phenomenally noisy. We did not add a single siren or car alarm or police siren or anything at that point, but they're constant throughout there. It's just wild. So we had to really work at sort of removing some of those. obviously you can't remove everything, so you're paring back as much as you can and minimizing as much as you can and just trying to salvage the worst. Because those scenes he has with his wife on the balcony there are lovely scenes, and you don't want to be pulling those scenes apart and sort of replacing with full ADR. So yeah, and then as for the accents, we had people I had Irish members of our sound team, and they listened to them, and they sort of told me the bits that they liked and enjoyed. And frankly, while sometimes maybe to an English ear there are bits that maybe aren't right, all of the Irish crew said it was perfect. So they were my sort of sounding board, and if they liked it, it passed. And yeah, the accents are tough to understand at times, but I think that's part of the charm of it and adds a level of authenticity to it. It's difficult. There were no Americans on our team, so I can't say how like to an American ear, I don't know. I hope that we've made it clear enough.
Oh, well, I never once turned on the captions, so I think you guys did an incredible job, given again like the slang and the accents. I didn't miss a word. I was so like focused in anyway. It was just so
that's
good.
Great. That's great, isn't it? And that's the main challenge these days, stopping people from turning on the subtitles. And if we're achieving that, then that's good.
Yeah, mission accomplished. And I can't believe the sirens in the apartment in Harry's flat. None of those were added in because of them. One of them seems so serendipitous.
Yeah, well, maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe there's a couple added, but we were definitely working at reducing. Like it's that apartment seemed to. I mean, it's such a loud part of the city. It's right in the middle. It's above it. The flat is literally above a train station. Like the train station, it's one of those, the trains pull into the bridge, and the train station's on the bridge across the Thames. So it was incredibly loud. So yeah, a lot of them, there might be a couple added, but a lot of them are just the natural sounds of the recordings from the day.
Wow, that's so great, because their conversations, it's like he's got a dangerous job and she's not feeling so safe about it, and the sirens just kind of add to that feeling. That's so funny that they were like there the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was a bit of a challenge, because quite often it did feel, when you listen to it, that sometimes the police were on their way, which is not the feel we wanted to give at certain times. So then we'd have to really sort of work at cleaning them out of the dialogues at those certain moments, because you don't. Yeah, it was just giving the wrong feel at times. So
yeah,
we made it work.
So let's look at the clip that you sent over. This is the club scene. Eddie and his friends go to the club, and it's a bit chaotic. Let's check it out.
Where's your blade now, cunt?
Jesus, Eddie, fuck me! Who's fucking next? Huh? Come on, cunt! You're fucking on coming up! Come on! Fucking hell! Fuck off!
All right, so it's loud, it's chaotic, it's the type of club where someone can get stabbed and it doesn't shut the club down. There's important dialogue that happens in here. So tell me about some of your challenges and opportunities on the sound editorial side.
Yeah, it was the first sequence that we tackled, and it's the most important sequence in episode 1. And it really, whilst it's not the very first scene, it's the scene that really sets the tone of the show, or the sequence that sets the tone of the show. So again, we had our team who were working on the corridor with the picture department, and alongside Ali, who was our music editor, because like sort of shaping the Prodigy track around all the sort of the dialogue and the action was really important. And it was a constant feeding of mixes that we would do, like a full mix. It wasn't even stems. We'd do it. Alex would cut a scene. They'd deliver it to us. We'd mix a full stereo or 5:1 bounce of that scene, give it back to Alex. Alex would review, and then review like further reviews with execs and Guy. and then we get notes, and it'd be that sort of circular process all the way through. There is a lot of ADR in the club scene. It was needed just to get the sort of just to deal with the sort of huge volume of people in there. It was a really fun one for the crowd guys, the Loot Group team, just to try and get as much of a reaction to that fight as we could story wise, while still allowing them to have the conversations. It was such a fun sequence to do. And I think it really, and Martin did this incredible mix where the music's sort of still there. And the show is actually quite, outside of this sequence, the show is actually quite pared back at times. There's quite a lot of tension in the score, but like Tom's character, it only actually explodes into life at certain moments throughout the entire series. So it's nice with this sequence that we could just go full and big and loud and chaotic, really.
And I know we're not, really covering episode 2, but there was another scene in episode 2 where Harry goes back to the club to confront Valjean. He knows a lot more than he was saying, and that was a great scene too. Like all the smashing bottles and like pouring stuff over his head. A little less dialogue in that scene, but it certainly seemed just as challenging.
Yeah, that's a fun sequence, and there's a huge amount going on sound design wise. Like the style of the show is very naturalistic, but there are certain moments where the sound design becomes a bit more synthetic and a bit more sort of emotion based, and that's certainly a sequence. It's happening under the music, but it's interesting if it's not there, you do feel it's gone. Like there's some sort of really nice transitions into the sort of out of the scene. And there's a lot of sort of heavy, granular sort of synth stuff happening during the fight. Yeah, it's a fun sequence. They had a lot of fun with that. And it was nice for the dialogue department just to be able to get out of the way for a few minutes at least.
Let the sound effects and the music take over.
Yeah.
So the backgrounds, they're not so prominent, but when you do hear them, I really like how you use sound to kind of reinforce social class. So, where these two families, the Harrigans and the Stevensons, fit into the social scheme, right? So Conrad Harrigan's estate, high class, old money. So there's lots of nature sounds. It feels really remote and isolated from the threat. And then Richie Stevenson's club, I think it's called the Sinful Monkey. It's hilarious. It's more like kind of blue collar, definitely inner city. You hear a lot of sirens, traffic. When you walk in, there's like a football match on the TV. And so you really do get a sense that even though these are both like two like king criminal type dudes, they live in completely different worlds. So can you talk about your approach to the backgrounds and kind of using sound to not only establish location, but sort of reinforce, who these characters are and where they're coming from in life or where they are in life?
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting aspect of the show in that, unlike a lot of things that are shot in London, there was a real understanding of where everything is in London. Like if you see someone driving from like the sort of Paddy Considine's house, from Kevin's house to central London, they move from west and they travel to central and then they get to Docklands, and it's generally, with like very few exceptions, really well plotted. And like it is very true to London. The hospital that Harry goes to in episode 1 is, they've changed it, it's Homerton University Hospital, which is where my children were born, and it's in East London, and it would be where someone would go if they were involved in a stabbing at a club at wherever the club is, Canary Wharf. So that's all very accurate. And so when we were talking about building this sort of the more, for want of an East London side of things, where we've got a sort of the Sinful Monkey, we were trying to think, we did a lot of recordings from where we live, because I happen to live in East London, and hopefully it's a sort of quite a nice bit of East London, but it's still East London, and we're recording around here. We really struck upon the idea that there's a common sound in London now in the slightly, is the sound of the line bikes that have been stolen, and they're sort of paid for bikes, and they have this alarm. So our sound design team went out for a good couple of weekends trying to record kids who've stolen the sort of the sort of Uber bikes, and even think they might have tried to steal one themselves so they could get this sound the alarm. So occasionally, so now in the first couple of episodes, every time a bike passes, there's normally like a dingling sort of lime alarm sort of trying to associate to it to try and tell that story. And then obviously we move out to sort of the West London in the nicer bit, and then the Cotswolds, which is where the sort of Pierce Brosnan's big house is, and obviously that's a very rural bit of England, and then we can really lean into sort of the wildlife and the nature sounds that you would hear there. So yeah, it's as much as we wanted to tell that story, we're actually just telling the story of what's on screen. The filmmakers did a really good job of sort of accurately plotting the different areas throughout London.
Yeah, and you really feel like the grit and grime when you're with Ritchie, especially, upstairs in his club. Then when you go downstairs, there's nothing. Like, none of those sounds are in that space. You don't hear sirens, you don't hear traffic. Did a really good job of showing, like, okay, he might be in a busy inner city place, but like he is in his own sheltered little location downstairs.
Yeah, and that's how the sound evolves. We'd sort of really gone to town in the sound design in that location to make it really like a throbbing, like dangerous sort of like we do in sound. But actually, throughout the mixing process and the dialogue with the producers, it becomes a much more naturalistic scene, because the scene where Ritchie and Harry are threatening each other plays really nicely. And there are times where we need to it helps to have sound step in and reinforce, but sometimes it just helps to let that scene play out. And I think it plays really nicely as it is.
And there's another great meeting between Harry and Ritchie. They go to the boxing gym, Moody's boxing gym. I love what you did with the light, the sound of the buzzing light in there. It sounds so like agitated. Like, it sounds like Harry and Ritchie's last nerve frying the entire time they're having that tense talk.
That's very kind of you to say. Yeah, I mean, that was a lovely environment to do, because they'd shot it next to a train line, so we had the trains to be able to sort of really tell the sort of like the really ominous sort of thing, and we could really punctuate cuts with that. And then the sort of Moody making his tea and the background, sort of really awkward sort of timed tea clinks and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, like that sort of stuff is really fun to do, and the detail does help. Like, it's, even if it's quiet and just in the background, I think we can really help reinforce some of the action in those moments.
And I love the sound of the room on their voices. I don't know if that was something that was captured in production or if it was added on, but you really do get the feel of like how big that space is, because you can hear it on their voices. You can almost hear like the boxing ring behind them, the mat sort of vibrating too. It was really good. So I know we're not looking at this one either, but in episode 2, there was that great car chase sequence in which Zosha and Kiko, they are driving Eddie to Conrad's estate, but they encounter Ritchie along the way. This was such a great car chase scene. Can you talk about your sound work for that?
Yeah, I mean, it was frantic. I don't know. Part of the challenge of Mobland was that it's actually, we did the entire full sound post from start to finish, start of track lay to end of mix, in probably 2.5 months for the whole 10 episodes. I think maybe 3 months. It was like, for British standards at least, it was an incredibly quick turnaround. So we were rolling. That was another one of the scenes that we started as early as we could, but we were still track laying as they were shooting that scene. So we'd do a little section of it, and then we'd have to park it as we were waiting for like another insert to be shot. And again, we didn't get to do any location recordings, but we just had to buy a lot of bespoke libraries, and we built it from there, really. Like, we had one guy pretty much on cars throughout the entire series who developed the sounds of each of the hero vehicles, and we worked with the production to sort of exactly really nail down those sounds. So he sort of took charge of that sequence. There's the usual sort of sound design, punctuation, but again, it's all born out of authenticity and trying to use as accurate a sounds for the cars. But it's amazingly dynamic as a sequence. I think it's really, really fun, and there's just about enough dialogue in there to sort of tell the story and stay in contact with the characters, but not. It generally gives the sound effects enough time and space to sort of really sing.
There's a lot of car scenes in the show, in and out of cars.
Yeah,
They're always going somewhere. What was the
yeah.
production sound like? I'm sure they had the cars all mic'd up beautifully.
Yeah, kind of. Like, I mean, the cars are good. I mean, luckily for us, because they're gangsters and bad guys, they're not too concerned about electric cars, and electric cars are quite difficult to do to make dynamic. So at least a lot of the cars are all petrol and or diesel, and so at least you can have like big sounds, and you can hide a lot of sins behind that sort of stuff. If you get into trouble in electric cars, where there's not much to hide behind. So we had a lot to hide behind. We again, ADR wise, there are scenes with ADR in the cars, but I'd say generally we got away with most of the stuff we could. Um, we had two sound recorders because they had to shoot so quickly. Like, I mean, so there's Mark and Stu, and they both ran really good teams. And, you know, I think it was an extremely fast shoot. I think post was extremely fast. The shoot was even faster. But they did a really, really good job. And as with a lot of shows, all shows I've been involved in the last, I don't know how many years, it's entirely radio mic dependent because getting a boom in with all the cameras is a really tough job these days. So, but the radios worked really well, and we had a lot of ADR. We did a lot of Space Crate ADR where we have the sort of ADR on set, just trying to keep everything rolling because we were still mixing. We were mixing as they were shooting because the shoot didn't wrap until the start of transmission or something crazy like that. It was very tight on transmission. So we had ADR rolling, and yeah, it was a great team, very slick, big team, like much bigger than I would normally consider you would normally tackle an episode like a season like this. But it was great.
I love the space crate idea. You know, the actors, they're in character, just, you know, get whatever you need right then and there. So awesome. I'm glad to...
Yeah, I mean, it's a real luxury, and actually it's something that has been brought up on many productions I've worked on, and then there's always been a workaround. But actually this is the first time that we have had to do it, and I was really impressed. Yeah, I was really impressed, and we moved the space crate around a little bit to different locations, and they did a really good job. It's helpful.
So Matt, who helped with the sound design? Who were your sound designers on the show?
We had a great team. We had Tom Jenkins, and who works alongside me very closely. We have Gray Aletta, who's an amazing Canadian, Brian Gilligan, and Matt Waits. And they all we had to hit across multiple episodes simultaneously, so they all worked alongside each other. And the thing that was really impressive was just the way they managed to sort of juggle just elements of shows to the point where we'd get an episode in, and they'd all have to hit a certain element within that episode in that week to get it sort of singing, and they did a great job. They were amazing.
And you work with this team often, right? So you guys, you all know each other's tastes and...
Yeah, we have there's a really core group of people. Like, obviously I'm part of Sona with Ben and Luke, and then outside of that we have a wider group of freelancers and assistants who we always work with. And this one required a particularly large team, so we expanded. But it is nice that when we bring people in, it's always people we know. Quite often they're people who we've worked with for many. Ian Eyre, who was our ADR supervisor at the start, I probably worked with Ian 15 years ago. Like, these are all people who we've sort of grown up with. But then there were new people, like Louisa Kearns came on, who was amazing on dialogues, and I'd never worked with Louisa before, and she will now be part of the team moving forward, I'd imagine, and if she'll have us. So, you know, it's nice we've got this lovely community around here of freelancers just working together. It's lovely.
So of all the episodes this season, why did you pick episode 1 for award consideration?
I don't know. I always find it really difficult, whatever the show, to pick which episode. So I think my general rule is pick one unless there's a specific reason not to. But that said, it's a show that we put loads of work in, and I'm really proud of it. And episode 1 is always the hardest one to do, and you're finding out the style and the tone of the show. So I don't know if it's significantly better, or there could have been a better episode to pick. But frankly, for me, it's the one that we sort of poured everything into. And if you get one right, then, you know, the season's going to go well, on a personal level and a creative level. So it's the one we poured a lot of effort into. So that's why I picked it, really.
Yeah, and it's like the getting to know you phase for the audience. If you can suck them in with episode 1, then they usually stick around for the whole season. I mean, I was completely sucked in.
Yeah, and I think it's a really it's to the producers and guys and all the writers credits that one is such a strong episode. And I found my wife, secretly binging it in the back in another room. Like, it does seem to be one of those shows that people have really sort of taken to, which is really nice, because quite often we get to work on shows, and whilst they may be amazing, they don't really people don't really grab hold of them in the way that Mobland has really grabbed people, which is nice.
I can't wait for season 2. And I know I'm not going to even ask if there's going to be a season 2, but I hope there is. And I hope we get to talk about your sound work for season 2. Matt, thank you so much for being here to talk about your sound work on Mobland. Best of luck to you this award season.
Thank you very much. Been fun. Thank you.